We're about to embark on an experiment in television news. It's an attempt to give a few of our critics a forum on network television in which they can respond to real or perceived injustices done to them by network television. Everything you see over the next hour is in response to charges made against ABC News in particular or television news in general. The charges are leveled in one case by a particular corporation, in other cases by groups of people and individuals. In some instances, ABC News has helped produce the presentations, but the opinions are those of our critics. This program represents their viewpoint.
This is ABC News Viewpoint. Tonight, the conflict between big business and television news.
The problem with television is that you have to say it all in 20 seconds, and you can't say it all in 20 seconds.
Kaiser Aluminum responds to a critical ABC 2020 report.
2020 also accused Kaiser Aluminum of admittedly influencing the National Electric Code. That's just ridiculous.
Blacks in television news, do they really have equal employment opportunity?
Seems to me that the smart executive at the network level is one who is looking for the very best people and must understand that you will find those among the minorities in this country.
The Arab community and the question of stereotyping.
But now the word Arab has become synonymous with the word terrorist because of the way the press has stereotyped the conflict in the Middle East.
And ERA opponent comments on a recent Nightline broadcast.
I don't think there's ever been an issue that has benefited more from outright bias in all kinds of media than the so-called Equal Rights Amendment.
And a look at some critical letters from ABC News viewers.
I am aghast and appalled at the activities in Iowa of an ABC TV crew from your 2020 program.
Now from New York, here again is Ted Koppel.
Every day, more than 200 affiliated television stations carry the words and pictures of ABC News to more than 35 million people. The impact, quite obviously, is enormous. That point has been made time and again by public figures, by corporations, and by individuals who feel frustrated by what they believe is the lack of opportunity to strike back, to respond with equivalent impact when they are convinced they've been treated unfairly. For business in particular, it's a frustration which may be heightened by the fact that American television and American business have interlocking interests. But as James Walker reports, the confrontation is a classic one, which grows out of the fact that business and journalism frequently view the same reality from different perspectives.
We're tired of constantly reading that American business is second-rate, that we're riddled with inefficiency. We'll try to be sensitive to your needs. But you be sensitive to ours. Don't duck us. Don't treat us as though we were not entitled to know. And then we'll give you the benefit of the doubt. You work on being accurate, and we won't need the benefit of the doubt.
That's how Hollywood sees the relationship between business and the media. Not too different from the way business people like David Rockefeller see it.
The contribution of business to our society is not always understood or appreciated or reported.
The problem with television is that you have to say it all in 20 seconds, and you can't say it all in 20 seconds. Therefore, it falls short on every level. It's superficial, it's short-sighted.
And businessmen charge, reporters get the facts wrong. Item, Love Canal, New York. 236 families are evacuated because of potential dangers posed by buried chemicals that have leached to the surface. The Hooker Chemical Company, which had buried the chemicals, became the media's target and the fall guy. Louis Banks, professor of business at MIT and a former editor of Fortune magazine, says the damage to Hooker caused by inaccurate and incomplete reporting was devastating.
If we're talking about Hooker Chemical, you're talking about character assassination. You know, you've been mugged. We were left with the general impression that a corporation had deliberately poisoned the earth.
Don Bader, president of Hooker when the Love Canal incident occurred, says reporters were biased.
The media made certain assumptions in its coverage that I think were erroneous, unfortunate, and have since been shown to be perceptions that didn't bear with the facts.
Bader says not only did reporters ignore facts, such as Hooker's warning that the chemicals had been buried, but television reporters in particular, he says, sensationalized and oversimplified the complicated story.
Do I let my 3-year-old stay? She has a birth defect now.
They seem to want to deal in anecdotal kind of stories, stories of people who felt they were affected by the chemicals, although no data existed.
For example, stories about the buried chemicals causing cancer were later refuted by this New York State study, finding that the rate of cancer at Love Canal was no greater than anywhere else in the state. One result of the media's treatment of Hooker is that the company is now using television to try to ensure more objective reporting. They're doing it by recording interviewers, recording them. Hooker is also fighting back by publishing fact sheets detailing corporate and scientific reports that it says the press ignored. Another weapon, aggressive ad campaigns pioneered by the Mobil Oil Corporation. It's a tactic used more and more by business when they feel abused by the press.
Well, we consider ourselves reactive. We're not out there looking for a fight, but at the same time, if we think that we've been wrongfully accused or misstatements are made about us, we're going to correct the record.
A message from the Mobile Information Center.
Good evening, I'm Dick Callanan. Most Americans have an exaggerated idea about oil company profits.
And corporations are also telling their story by purchasing commercial time.
Here's Dave Johnson with details.
A recent Opinion Research Corporation study of attitudes toward business revealed a startling fact: people's distorted view of profits.
And they're doing it by copying television news techniques.
This is the Permian Basin, where gambling on energy has been on a winning streak.
And by hiring television news people, like former Philadelphia anchorwoman Marcia Rose, to participate in their programs that are then offered without charge to local TV stations.
It seems to me the issue is there anything inaccurate, misleading, or unfair in what we're saying, not in how we do it. We used news people because they know the technique of questioning.
And businesses are also hiring nationally known news people to make informational films.
Hello, I'm Martin Negronsky, and I've been reporting and commenting on the news for many years. Today, I'd like to present to you a special report on the fertilizer industry.
Over 1 million television viewers saw this program, which promotes the use of chemical fertilizer. But when some companies feel they have been maligned, they use a new weapon, the company-produced videotape rebuttal.
We feel that ABC edited out, presented incorrectly, or chose to ignore many facts and truths regarding the uranium mining industry.
This response to an ABC News documentary called The Uranium Factor was paid for by a New Mexico-based pro-energy group that borrowed a Gulf Oil Company publicist and hired a camera crew from an ABC affiliate.
Forget the microphone, forget the camera, make yourself comfortable and talk directly to the reporter.
Many businesses are also sending employees to schools like this one to learn how to use television to their advantage. Virginia Sherwood is a former network reporter who now works for the U.S. Chamber of Commerce as a TV consultant. It's a rapidly expanding field. Kent McDougall, a business reporter for the Los Angeles Times, spent 18 months examining disagreements between business and the media, disagreements that he believes are fundamental.
After all, business and the media serve different functions. Business's job is to create jobs, to create goods, and I think the media's job is to make sure that business acts responsibly. So some tension, some arguments are bound to break out from time to time.
There's no premium right now on your developing the complex story. The premium is on the visual, quick cut. So, I mean, if I were going to organize a group, a movement, it would be free the television journalist, to let him to do his job. I'd like to see you liberated.
Liberated, say business people, so television journalists can report complicated business stories fully and accurately. But at the same time, ironically, business is more and more using similar techniques to combat what it feels is inaccurate reporting. James Walker, ABC News, Washington.
Let's look now at a case in point. The issue between ABC News and the Kaiser Aluminum Company. Kaiser charges it was subjected to trial by television in a 2020 report on aluminum wiring that was broadcast last year. The company has sued ABC News for libel and has filed complaints with the Federal Communications Commission. The company says ABC News intentionally maligned Kaiser by charging it knew about the dangers associated with aluminum wiring, but went ahead and sold the product anyway. In order to understand the dispute, let's begin at the beginning. Here now is a summary of the 2020 report entitled Hot Wire with correspondent Geraldo Rivera.
On the day after Christmas 1978, Dan and Peggy Johansson lost their 15-month-old daughter Janet when fire gutted their home in Columbus, Georgia.
The crib was totally cremated, and the fire was contained to that one particular room. The cause of the fire was an aluminum wiring connection.
It's like a time bomb built within your walls.
What government investigator Kelly called a time bomb was marketed to the unsuspecting American public as a safe, inexpensive alternative to traditional copper wiring. The most critical problems are in construction done between 1965 and 1973. It was during that period that these homes in Fort Worth, Texas, and more than 2 million others across the country were wired with aluminum. The extent of the problem is indicated by hundreds of sworn affidavits received by the Federal Consumer Product Safety Commission. The affidavits tell of serious problems, of overheating, and of fires caused as a result of faulty aluminum wiring. 1965 to 1973 was a time of escalating copper prices, and builders and developers flocked to a product that saved them between $50 and $300 per home. The aluminum industry went to great lengths to equate its product with copper. Consider this 1964 Kaiser Aluminum marketing plan, obtained by ABC News. It instructs sales personnel to use the approach that aluminum, quote, is just the same as copper. But aluminum wiring is not just the same as copper. Far from it. When used in electrical work, aluminum is an unforgiving metal, one which must be used only with great care and with specially designed connectors. Our investigation uncovered the fact that between 1965 and 73, that did not happen. During that period, aluminum was attached to wall plugs with steel screws, designed for copper wire. But aluminum and steel have different rates of expansion, and the combination of the two metals can lead to a loose connection. The aluminum oxidizes when it loosens, preventing the electrical current from passing through. Heat builds up, and any flammable material next to an overheating wall receptacle can ignite and start a fire. We know now that Kaiser Aluminum at least knew their product needed special handling. These confidential documents, for example, were obtained by 2020. They show that way back in the 1950s, Kaiser Aluminum conducted extensive lab tests on aluminum wire. Their own scientific evidence warned that aluminum wire was very hazardous unless certain procedures were taken to prevent oxidation. But when the company put the product on the market, they failed to adequately warn the public of the hazards, and apparently they later withheld results of their tests from the government. Here, for example, a Westinghouse engineer is so upset by aluminum wire failures, he told an industry meeting in 1972, quote, "I feel it's time we must honestly and sincerely face up to the problem before the United States government, Congress, NATOR, or any federally subsidized agency begins to investigate this area." So how exactly did the product get on the market in the first place? The National Electric Code, for instance, for 8 years, allowed the use of aluminum wiring without proper precautions. The code has since been revised. The drafting of the National Electric Code was admittedly influenced by Kaiser Aluminum's representative on the code writing panel, a man named R.S. Keith. But was he concerned with product safety or just with company profits? In this 1967 speech to his sales staff, Mr. Keith told how he regarded the code as a, quote, political instrument, one whose provisions could either be good, that is profitable to Kaiser, or bad, meaning unprofitable. Kaiser Aluminum has refused repeated requests for an interview. Mr. Keith has since retired.
That was an edited version of the 2020 report that appeared on April 3rd, 1980. Kaiser Aluminum asked for 10 minutes of time on 2020 to present a reply to be produced by Kaiser itself. Initially, ABC News agreed to grant Kaiser time on 2020, but when ABC News changed that offer to Nightline, Kaiser said no. Kaiser's legal actions are still pending before the FCC and the California courts. What you are about to see now was produced not by ABC, but by Kaiser Aluminum. It represents Kaiser's viewpoint.
I'm Steve Hutchcraft of Kaiser Aluminum. On April 3rd, ABC's 2020 devoted a segment to aluminum residential wiring systems. Since that show was aired, a great many people, including many of my fellow employees, have asked me the questions, is aluminum wiring really unsafe? Did we, Kaiser Aluminum, really put a product, a hazardous product, in the marketplace? And did we cover that event up? My answer to these people and to all those questions was no, a very definite no.
I'm the Chief Electrical Inspector for the City of New Orleans. I've been in this position now for about 25 years.
What's your professional opinion of aluminum wiring?
We think that aluminum wiring is just as safe as copper when it's properly installed.
Would you live in a house with aluminum wiring?
I have aluminum wiring in my house. You didn't know that.
2020 also implied that Kaiser Aluminum did not do adequate research and development work prior to introducing aluminum branch circuit size wiring to the marketplace. That also is not true. These sizes of aluminum electrical conductors were first developed in the 1950s and tested for some 10 years prior to their introduction to the U.S. market in the mid-1960s.
We've tested a number of different types of wiring devices, electrical conductors, including both copper and aluminum. And by making these up with the prescribed methods for the trade, the connections are completely satisfactory.
2020 also alleged that aluminum connected to steel binding screws in a connecting device gets progressively worse with time, causing a heat buildup when the aluminum wire oxidizes. This was referred to as a ticking time bomb. Dr. Harry Gatos of the Massachusetts Institute of Technology and a consultant for Kaiser Aluminum is one of the world's foremost experts on metallurgy.
A statement that aluminum wiring is a ticking time bomb is not only technically unfounded, but also it is misleading and outright irresponsible.
2020 also accused Kaiser Aluminum of admittedly influencing the National Electric Code. That's just ridiculous.
As an electrical engineer who has worked 30 years in this industry, I travel the country continually analyzing and reporting on electrical work. I've authored over 20 books on electrical design and installation, and am the author of the National Electrical Code Handbook. I think 2020's presentation on aluminum wire was very unbalanced. It was very distorted. It was very inaccurate. It was extremely prejudicial. It obviously came from the conclusion beforehand that there was something wrong with aluminum wire. They started from the conclusion and then constructed and fabricated a presentation that made their point, in spite of the fact that it was totally unreal. So that it is really a sorry spectacle to see the type of irresponsible reporting that is done on something on which the verdict is already in. It is a safe product, properly applied, just as any product can be safe only when properly applied.
We have no idea why 2020 chose to single out Kaiser Aluminum. We do know, however, that it is unthinkable that our company would market a product that would put human life in jeopardy.
Steve Hutchcraft, Corporate Vice President and General Manager of the division in charge of all aluminum products for Kaiser, is now in our studio in New York, along with ABC News correspondent Geraldo Rivera. Mr. Hutchcraft, let me begin by asking you why it was that the first time around, when you had an opportunity to appear on this broadcast and presumably balance it somewhat more, Kaiser Aluminum refused.
Ted, it is not correct that we refused to appear on the broadcast. We agreed to appear live on the broadcast so that any comments that we made on the broadcast could not be taken out of context or edited. We were turned down on that request.
All right, Geraldo, I have to turn to you then and ask why that request was not honored. Why could they not appear live?
For us to turn our journalistic responsibility, that is the preparation of our programs in a fair, impartial, and objective way over to the people who are the subjects of the stories would be, in my mind, to surrender, to abdicate the responsibility of responsible journalists to people whose interest it is, presumably, to give not only their side of the story, but perhaps not to allow a fair hearing for the other sides. We can't make them the journalists no more than they can make us the electrical engineers.
Why would it have been any more unreasonable to do that on 2020 the first time around than what we're doing right now? I don't think we've abdicated our journalistic responsibility by having Mr. Hutchcraft here with you.
That was our point, Ted. We were prepared to do just this type of thing
We gave Kaiser 7 invitations to sit down for a formal interview. If we did an interview with the President of the United States, with the Secretary General of the United Nations, with any Chief of State, Head of State, anybody, and we were doing a broadcast, would we give Colonel Gaddafi, for instance, the right to edit a program in which he was the subject?
No, but Geraldo, forgive me, we're not talking about the right to edit. If I understand Mr. Hutchcraft correctly, what Kaiser was asking for was the opportunity to appear live so that there would be no opportunity to edit.
That is correct.
That's
absolutely correct.
What they wanted was 10 minutes of unedited airtime to give their specific point of view.
No, that would be in response to the piece that you did. I'm asking a question about why the first time around, if, for example, they did not want to appear in edited form, why would it not have been possible for you to do your piece and then to allow 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 4 minutes, whatever seems reasonable, to have Mr. Hutchcraft or someone like him in the studio to respond to what you've reported?
That is not what Kaiser wanted. Kaiser did not want to appear in the studio to respond to what we reported. Kaiser wanted to control the content of that investigative piece. Kaiser wanted to engineer a piece that reflected their corporation's point of view. For us to cede our responsibility to them, which indeed is what they asked for, regardless of the context they put it in right now, would be for us to abdicate our responsibility as responsible journalists, I say again.
Mr. Hutchcraft?
That is incorrect. As I stated before, we agreed to come on the program live and enter into debate very similar to the type of debate that we have here right now, and we were not given the opportunity to do so.
All right, let's get to the subject at hand. What Geraldo was charging in his report was that aluminum wiring could be dangerous when it is not properly installed.
Yes.
In the response, which, as you know, I've just seen for the first time, it seemed to me that you were not addressing that so much as the notion of aluminum wiring being safe when it is properly installed. Isn't that the whole issue here?
I think the whole issue here is that electricity is a dangerous commodity. Any electrical wiring system, when either not installed properly or when abused or overloaded, is potentially dangerous. There's in excess of 2 million electrical fires in people's homes every year in the United States. Only a small handful of those involve aluminum wiring, and I am very happy to say that there has not been one instance in the long time that we have been producing aluminum electrical products that a Kaiser Aluminum electrical product has been found to be the cause of a fire. I think that's a fantastic safety record, one that I'm proud of and one that our company is proud of. And I really don't understand what this whole issue is all about.
Go ahead, Geraldo. I know you want to respond to that.
Right, I certainly do. In 1974, the then almost brand new Federal Consumer Product Safety Commission branded brand circuit aluminum wiring an imminent consumer hazard. They branded that their #1 safety priority. They have recently, a test concluded in 1979, commissioned a test done by the prestigious Franklin Institute, a private testing operation. Franklin Institute did that test over a period of 1 year at a cost of $1 million. They found that aluminum brand circuit wiring was 55 times more likely to fail, that is, either overheat or indeed result in fire, than copper wiring, the same type of copper wiring.
Geraldo, forgive me for interrupting, but you've heard what Mr. Hutchcraft just said. No fires involving Kaiser Aluminum products. I mean, do you have evidence to contradict that? Because if not, that sounds like a pretty compelling piece of material.
Kaiser Aluminum recently settled a case brought in Long Island in which a parent and child were killed in a tragic residential fire. They settled the case for $300,000. So when Mr. Hutchcraft says that the issue has never been resolved by trial. One reason is that Kaiser settled before the issue would go to the jury. I think that there's a great deal of insincerity in his allegation.
All right, we've got about 40 seconds left. Mr. Hutchcraft, you've got the closing comment.
I think there's absolutely no insincerity in our comment. Kaiser Aluminum is, as I have said before, proud of our safety record on all of our electrical aluminum products. I think what we have missed here tonight is to talk about the issue of trial by television and the fact that the format of the trial by television, where the accuser is also the judge, the jury, and the prosecutor, and the only way that the defense can make its point is through the voice of the accuser, this does not lend itself to truth and balance. And I think this is a great concern. I think it's a concern that the American public should be concerned about. I think it's a concern that the media should be concerned about. I would hate to see, and I think it would be a shame, if the American public were to lose confidence in the legitimate TV news, one of the most powerful forces in the country today.
Mr. Hutchcraft, the judge has just given the jury a few more seconds. What would you recommend? What's the answer then?
I think it's going to be a matter of just trying to get more fairness and more balance in this whole issue. I know it's difficult when the pressures to strive for ratings are there, but I think somehow the media is going to have to ensure that the American public is not misled and is not misinformed.
I must have a final comment here. Kaiser has painted this as an issue between Kaiser Aluminum on the one hand and 2020 on the other. That is a very inaccurate reflection of exactly what is going on here. What we were reporting was testimony before the Congress of the United States. What we were reporting was the opinion of the Federal Consumer Product Safety Commission. What we were reporting was the consensus of the electrical contracting, the construction, and the aluminum industries as it exists today. It's not Kaiser against the media. It's Kaiser against the facts in this case. They had an opportunity, a fair opportunity, to appear on that broadcast, and they chose to reject, to ignore that request, and then react after the broadcast aired.
All right,
it's like having your cake and eating it too.
I'm afraid you've both also had a fair opportunity, and I realize we can't give as much time as either one of you would like, but I thank you both for being with us. In a moment, we'll turn to another area of dispute between television news and its critics, minorities who feel the media has not given them a fair shake.
Viewpoints will continue in a moment.
London.
Minority groups have been critical of television news on two levels. First, that they have been stereotyped, made one-dimensional in terms of their views and their roles in society. Second, that they are underrepresented in television journalism. The two levels can overlap. Max Robinson, anchorman of ABC's World News Tonight, has charged that American society as a whole, and television networks in particular, are guilty of unconscious racism. That black reporters are not given the same opportunity as whites to cover the full range of national and international news. We asked correspondent George Strait to examine the past and present status of blacks in television news.
President Johnson's first move to quell disorders in our cities, his commission on civil disorders, will
What you are watching is the first black news correspondent on network television, with a report on a federal investigation of urban riots. His name is Mal Good, and ABC hired him and put him on the air in 1962. Within a year, Good had company at both NBC and CBS.
Negroes who live in northwest Miami say they've been trying to get somebody to listen to
Here,
their
don't think too much of Earl Bucks as Secretary of Agriculture.
Problems of racism in America. Lem Tucker, NBC News.
In 19 years, the exception has become commonplace. The networks now employ 20 black correspondents, men and women who cover all types of stories. They anchor. Some are even among the highest paid in the industry. For the most part, black correspondents are now looked upon as just other professional journalists, not social experiments. Most black correspondents feel that is significant progress, but they also feel that the progress may be incomplete.
See, I think one of the important things about our presence in newsrooms, George, is not so much to fill some kind of employment quota. I think that's There are other jobs we could have, and in greater numbers because it's a small industry. But I think our importance is to be able to share our perspectives and perceptions.
Although present and highly visible, blacks express increasing concern that they are cast in the role of messenger with minimal control over the message being delivered.
Most of the blacks in this industry are on television. We are reporters, correspondents, but I don't know of a one in a decision-making process above the role of associate producer or producer. Not that those aren't important jobs, but they're not running the company.
These are the decision makers at ABC News. Every morning they meet to decide what stories should be covered and who should cover them. Ultimately, the very senior of them are responsible for how the stories are written and presented. None are black.
CBS and NBC refuse to allow our cameras into their morning conferences, but their situation is the same. There are no blacks among their news executives, executive producers, senior producers, or senior assignment editors.
From CBS News headquarters in New York.
Of the 36 people who prepare the news menu every day for 50 million Americans, none are black.
Maybe those executive producer positions, senior producer positions are the most important, because those guys really do sit there and they make the key decision. They have the show, they have the airtime, they say, okay, this is in and this is out. And no amount of black correspondents or producers will have the impact of one black senior producer on a show saying we ought to cover this.
There are only 19 of those senior executive producer positions in all of network television news, and the number of blacks in the pipeline leading to them is limited. CBS has 10 among its producer corps of 219, while ABC has only 6 blacks out of the 206 news producers it employs. NBC refused to release its figures, but sources say it has 11 blacks out of approximately 200 producers. NBC did volunteer one very significant fact, though. It has a black woman as head of its Chicago News Bureau. NBC is the only network that can claim such an achievement. But even with her, overall, there are only 28 black producers out of approximately 600 employed at the network level.
I think one reason may be that the blacks who come into broadcast journalism know that the quickest way to fame and nowadays a fortune is on the air. And so they haven't been aiming to be producers.
I think a lot of blacks, way back when the opportunities arose, made a mistake. They opted for the upfront, the flashy bit and the big money. I think now many more of them realize where the power is.
Though true, perhaps there is a more significant factor.
I think what happened was the networks looked around and said that initially they were under pressure, great pressure in the 60s to get blacks involved in television. So they took the easiest route. The easiest route is to put them on the air.
It happened that way because that was what the people who put the most pressure on, the black community, wanted most, because blacks seen on television gave to the general public the feeling that, well, we're there, we've made it.
Administration today postponed
in recent years, even that rush to put blacks on the air has eased. Since 1978, even though the news divisions at the networks have expanded considerably, the number of black correspondents has remained virtually the same, hovering between 18 and 20. A number of new blacks have been hired, but for the most part, only as replacements for other blacks who have left. It is this kind of action that has caused many blacks to wonder if their numbers have peaked, and if their incomplete progress within the industry is no accident.
I think it's a function of the society. I think that broadcast journalism is a reflection of the wider society. The wider society has certain racist patterns that are repeated in our industry.
I don't see that. I see quite the reverse desire. I see meeting after meeting in which a group of white males frequently would look around and say, you know, we talk a lot about this business of equal opportunity for women or blacks or minorities, And here we are sitting, and here are the 30 top executives of the ABCDEF Corporation, and we're all white males. What's the matter with us?
That kind of self-analysis has begun to produce a fundamental change in attitude at the networks. One that says that maybe it is more important that blacks be used as something more than what has been called window dressing.
The power of television today in our society is so immense and so all-pervasive that conscious efforts must be made to allow all the groups in society to participate in this instrument.
Seems to me that the smart executive at the network level is one who is looking for the very best people and must understand that you will find those among the minorities in this country as well as among white males.
None of us ever wants to fall back on the argument that blacks aren't qualified. And so what we have to do is we have to set up the mechanism that allows blacks to be qualified so that that argument doesn't even come up.
Into this highly pressurized world of network television, blacks alone seem to carry an extra burden, as virtually all feel they must make good on their opportunity if those who would follow are to get the same chance.
Because I felt a tremendous amount of pressure when I took this job, that I could not fail. I must not fail. And that kind of burden is much too great for anybody to have to carry. To constantly be guarding against failure almost guarantees failure.
Despite the fears, most blacks in the business have not failed. In fact, they've flourished. But their success and high visibility has distracted from just how short the strides of progress have been. There is still only one black news director of a large station in a major city, one national anchor, one network bureau chief, and no executives. At the beginning of this report, we saw Mal Good analyzing the Kerner Commission report on civil disorders and urban riots. That commission concluded that television contributed significantly to the racial divisions that still afflict this country. It observed that the world of television is almost totally white in both appearance and attitude. Well, today, almost 2 decades later, that observation is still half right. Television's appearance has changed, but the attitudes remain much the same. George Strait, ABC News, New York.
Another minority, one perhaps we don't think about very often, is Arab Americans, 2.5 million of them. They also have their grievances. After ABC News broadcast an hour-long report last spring called The Unholy War about turmoil in the Middle East, Arab Americans complained that this program reflected a subtle form of discrimination, one they detect in many other television news broadcasts, newspapers, and even entertainment programs. These Americans of Arab descent complain they are stereotyped, the victims of oversimplified attitudes and uncritical judgment. John Martin has a report on the Arab American viewpoint.
This is the classic image many Americans have of the Arabs. It is drawn not just from Hollywood. In newspaper cartoons, Arabs are often ugly and grasping. On billboards, they are oil bandits holding up America with high gas prices. In magazines, they are sheiks filled with lust for women under their control. In one reference book, the word Arab is synonymous with vagabond and tramp. On FBI videotapes, Arabs are so venal they corrupt America's politicians. In the news, a CBS broadcast on Arab visitors to London said, quote, "They come for 3 or 4 months, and they come to buy anything that is not nailed down, plus an awful lot that is," unquote. In many news accounts, unidentified Arabs are the terrorists of the world, frenzied zealots who kill the innocent. An ABC News broadcast, instead of specifying the PLO, said, quote, "The Palestinians have played the principal role in placing terrorism in the center of the world stage," unquote. The Iranians are not Arabs, but Persians. Yet anti-Arab feelings are so high that some Americans still blame the takeover of the U.S. Embassy on Arab fanatics. These are the images many Americans use to identify more than 100 million people who live in the Arab world, and also the 2.5 million Arab Americans who live in the United States.
Now the word Arab has become synonymous with the word terrorist because of the way the press has stereotyped the conflict in the Middle East. The Arabs are all murderers. There are 100 million Arabs, and is it possible that they're all murderers?
James Abaresk is a former United States Senator of Lebanese ancestry who founded the American Arab Anti-Discrimination Committee here in Washington. It has a staff of 8 and says it is spending about $200,000 in its first year to rebut what it feels are unfounded accusations about Arabs and Arab Americans.
You're convinced that the American press hasn't done an honest job of reporting who the Arabs are?
I think the press does generally, with exceptions, of course, whatever's fashionable. And if it's fashionable to put your heel down to stamp down on Arabs or people of Arab descent, that's what most of them do.
Executive Director James Zogby says the committee now has more than 3,000 members across the country.
When we were growing up as kids, like Italians and Poles, etc., there was racism on the block, on the street. Kids would make ethnic jokes. Okay? We all were subjected to that. I was a greasy Leb or a Lebanese merchant or camel jockey, whatever, but we outgrew it and the society outgrew it. But today, the racism that Arab Americans are subjected to doesn't come on the block, on the street corner. My kids get it on television Saturday morning. My kids get it when they read the cartoon strips. My kids get it when they listen to the news. It comes from the federal government. It comes in advertising. It comes in news reporting. It comes, in other words, from the major conveyors of information in this society. That's very different.
Zogby's parents were born in Lebanon, and he says he wants his children to be proud of that. So far, his youngest are too young to feel ethnic slurs, he says, but not his 11-year-old.
Do any of your classmates actually shun you because you're Arab?
But not many of them really know about my race. If they knew that you were Arab, it makes you feel, how would they think? Would they think that you're really a weird kid, or because you're Arab, and why aren't you rich, and why don't you go back to Lebanon? And it doesn't give you a good feeling. It makes you kind of angry inside that they would think to make fun of me.
Name-calling among 6th graders may seem almost normal in American society. But for 23-year-old Nora Hassan Zain and her younger brother and sisters, anti-Arab feeling goes beyond names. They resent the images applied to them by people they meet.
We're often stereotyped as, in very negative terms.
Such as?
Such as, you know, we ride camels, we come from the desert, we're rich, filthy rich, we all have oil in our backyard, we bribe people.
You're smiling. Does it make you laugh?
No, it doesn't. It's really aggravating because it's something that we deal with every day.
Do you think people look at you as a terrorist, as a potential terrorist?
Oh, sure, as soon as they know. Where do you come from? Oh, I'm an American, but where are you from originally? Oh, I'm an Arab American. Oh, terrorist.
Really?
Oh, right out, very, very blunt.
You know, term sand nigger comes around sometimes. And
sand nigger?
Yeah, and things like that.
Do you blame these people for being ignorant or for being bigoted?
No. Most of them aren't. It's just what they see. It's what they see on TV.
Many Arab Americans, like the Hassans, have blended into their communities, but some still live and work close together. This is Atlantic Avenue in Brooklyn, New York, an area dense with Arab restaurants and shops. Even though other Arabs blame television news and the press for anti-Arab insults, George Kanatas is philosophical about the media.
If you feel secure about yourself and about your heritage and the fact that you are an American first and foremost, I mean, there's nothing that can change that. It's always convenient to have a scapegoat somewhere. And that's understandable. I can see that. And I can understand the media's problem with it, too. Although the media, in almost every case, has something to learn from everything that they do. They've got to realize more strongly and more fully that there really are two sides to every question.
George's nephew, Eddie Alvarado, blames bias in the media and the bigotry it creates for something that happened to him.
I happened to be working in the store, and I was doing a few things, and all of a sudden a couple of kids walked by the store door, and they screamed in, "Why don't you get lost, you something Arab?" And that's the first time I ever heard that. And it right at my gut, you know. Now I'm third generation. Go home.
So, for a long time, America's Arabs have found themselves prisoners of images from the movies, the newspapers, and especially television. They feel this has made them objects of scorn. But now, like many other peoples who have come to America, they're no longer willing to keep silent, even though other Americans may sometimes think they overreact and see things that aren't there. The fact remains that for them, the slurs exist and influence people and hurt.
It's really unjust that they should do that. That they should do that to people, Arab people like me. I mean, I've talked with my classmates before about the melting pot. America's supposed to be, well, if it can be a melting pot for French people, Spanish people, why can't it be a melting pot for Arab people, too?
Let's turn now to another complaint about a specific ABC News broadcast. On June 30th, supporters of the Equal Rights Amendment staged major rallies throughout the country. And that night, the ABC News program Nightline focused on the ERA issue. The Stop ERA Committee charged that the program was devoted primarily to the views of Eleanor Smeal of the National Organization of Women and another ERA supporter, actor Alan Alda. Elaine Donnelly, National Media Chairman of the Stop ERA Committee, said the anti-ERA side of the story was not adequately told. Here now is Elaine Donnelly's viewpoint in an editorial commentary produced by members of the Nightline staff.
I don't think there's ever been an issue that has benefited more from outright bias in all kinds of media than the so-called Equal Rights Amendment. You may have the impression that this amendment is for women, or that it has something to do with equal pay for equal work. Well, it doesn't. Equality of rights under the law shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of sex. Please note that Section 1 of the ERA refers only to federal and state governments. It doesn't affect private employers. It doesn't put women into the Constitution. We're already there. It doesn't add anything to the equal pay laws already on the books. Die-hard ERA supporters keep insisting that
2-to-1. The nation 2-to-1 supports the Equal Rights Amendment.
The fact is, when ERA referenda questions were put to the voters of 6 states, they were overwhelmingly defeated by the voters. The claim that
it sounds like a handful of legislators, a handful, maybe 6 men in various states around the country who will not cast the crucial vote to ratify the Equal Rights Amendment in their states.
That doesn't hold up either. ERA's been defeated by 20 state legislatures, including 5 states that reversed their earlier votes from a yes to a no. In many of these states, female lawmakers and volunteers have been leading the fight against ERA, mainly because of the Section 2 enforcement clause. The Congress shall have the power to enforce, by appropriate legislation, the provisions of this article. This is the part of ERA that would give federal courts and bureaucrats the power to wipe out many state and federal laws that benefit women. Why would anyone want to transfer more power to the federal government? The ultimate sign that ERA has failed was the outrageously unfair time extension bill passed by Congress 2 years ago. This was an attempt to rig the rules of the game for the benefit of the losing side. Not a single state has ratified ERA since 1977. Nevertheless, we've had lavish TV coverage of the latest ERA hype, featuring celebrities like actor Alan Alda, who have easy access to the media, but who refuse to debate the issue equally. All of this hoopla gives you the impression that ERA is still alive after legal death. The problem with ERA is it's not just a harmless statement of good intentions. You can't pick and choose what you like or don't like. As part of the U.S. Constitution, the highest law of the land, ERA would actually work as a tool to force the most extreme goals of women's lib on all of us, whether we like it or not, by federal court order. For example, the women's advocates of the National Organization for Women told the U.S. Supreme Court that women should have an equal right to fight the next war along with men. The court's decision against registration of women for the draft brought a predictable response.
It's outrageous. It is an absolute perpetuation of a lie.
The real big lie is that men and women are interchangeable in all roles in the military. Volunteer women can and do serve well. But tests have shown that because of physical differences, women do not have an equal opportunity to survive in a wartime environment. This makes the whole social experiment dangerous and indefensible. Nevertheless, if the Equal Rights Amendment had been in effect, the court would have had no choice but to impose Now's will on the majority, regardless of public opinion. Women don't think alike on important issues like this, so it's wrong to imply that the feminists of Now speak for all women. It's been said that women demanded the right to vote because they didn't want men always telling them what to do. In today's world, women have said they don't want other women telling them what to do either. That's why the Equal Rights Amendment has been defeated, and that's why it's time to put the issue to rest. I'm Elaine Donnelly.
Every week, ABC News receives thousands of letters from viewers expressing their complaints and comments on our performance. Some of them require answers we feel deserve wider attention. Some of them simply speak for themselves. Here's a sampling. This letter comes from Alan Rosenberg of Bala Cynwyd, Pennsylvania, and concerns a recent Nightline program. Mr. Rosenberg writes, I found your coverage of the nomination of Judge Sandra Day O'Connor slanted, trivial, and profoundly stupid. As they say in TV biz, there is a ready cure for my dissatisfaction, and that is to turn the dial, which I most assuredly will do in the future. Our next letter concerns the ABC News close-up report, When Crime Pays, which dealt with abuses in the practice of law enforcement agencies paying criminal informants. James Stewart, an Indianapolis attorney, writes, it was my overall judgment that your program was slanted against the government. Obviously, the true story would not be as sensational, nor therefore as interesting to the media as the biased story presented, but that fact is no justification for slanted news reporting. This letter concerns an investigative report and a question of journalistic ethics. The subject was a 2020 report broadcast May 14th, dealing with fraudulent insurance sales practices in the state of Iowa. ABC News agreed to turn over taped material to a county prosecutor in return for permission to accompany police and record the sales practices under investigation with hidden cameras. Michael Gartner, editor and president of the Des Moines Register and Tribune, wrote to complain.
I am aghast, appalled, and disgusted. For decades, news organizations, print and broadcast, have been battling in the courts to establish the principle of independence. In case after case, we have argued that we gather information solely for our own purposes. Now, along comes ABC, which willingly acts as an investigative arm of a government agency, gathering evidence for the state of Iowa and demolishing in one swift stroke the wall that should exist between the press and the government.
Next, a mailgram to World News Tonight anchorman Frank Reynolds from Dr. Richard Parker of Gainesville, Florida. Dr. Parker asked Frank if he would define the labels right and left and conservative and liberal as they are applied to political figures. Frank Reynolds replies.
Dr. Parker raises a valid point, one that concerns all of us who are required to provide necessary information about a political figure or a political organization or a country. We do not use the terms conservative or liberal in the pejorative sense. For example, I don't believe that Senator Goldwater objects to being described as a conservative, and certainly President Reagan does not. Neither does Senator Edward Kennedy flinch from the label of liberal. As a general rule, we have no hesitation in applying the term right-wing to a government such as Chile's, made up of military officers who seized control from a democratically elected government. Labels can be misleading, and as a matter of fact, we do not frequently use them. But I think it is important to add as much accurate information about a person or a group as is possible, given the kind of shorthand journalism we are obliged to practice, particularly in television. But the aim is not to accuse or denigrate, but to explain and enlighten.
And our last letter from Susan Strawbridge of Green Valley, Illinois, concerns the date as it appears every night at the beginning of ABC News World News Tonight. Notice anything out of the ordinary about the date? Ms. Strawbridge, an English teacher, did.
What does the use of June the 30th, 1981 say about ABC News? It tells me that somebody doesn't know that a comma comes between the day and the year. How would you answer the question, quote, if ABC News doesn't have to use commas, why do I, unquote? I answer it, ABC News is incorrect. It should be June 30th, comma, 1981. Please don't undo all those years of teaching by reinforcing the incorrect.
Ms. Strawbridge, you're absolutely correct. There ought to be a comma between the day and the year. The reason the comma is missing, indeed the reason we frequently omit correct marks of punctuation, is a matter of visual style, of what looks clear and clean on TV. Nevertheless, so many people have written in specifically about your comma, Ms. Strawbridge, that we'll talk to the producers of World News Tonight and see if they can't restore it in the interests of proper grammar. As a token of good faith, we'll be happy to insert that comma for you on this program. Susan Strawbridge, this is your comma. A final note, grammatical inaccuracies notwithstanding, the men and women who operate the news division here at ABC and over at our competitors, CBS and NBC, those people expend enormous energy and show great dedication to the principles of accuracy and fairness. Nevertheless, we sometimes make mistakes, factual errors. When that happens, it's ABC's policy to correct the mistake on the same program. That's been common practice for a long time. What we've tried to address with this broadcast is a more complex issue having to do with opinion and perceptions. How do we accommodate on television the views of our consumers who, if they were dealing with a newspaper or a magazine, would simply write a letter to the editor? The purpose of this program, Viewpoint, has been to provide that kind of forum for people who watch television news and disagree with what we say and how we say it. It can't begin to satisfy everyone, we know that. As we noted earlier, we're dealing with an audience which daily runs into the tens of millions. What we are acknowledging, though, is that there are other viewpoints which deserve access to network television. And that is what this program has tried to do. I'm Ted Koppel in New York. Thank you for watching.
This has been Viewpoint, a presentation of ABC News.